Okay, good morning, everyone. I guess we'll begin our forum. Today's a little unusual because we have more people on Zoom online than we do in the room. So we'll start the meeting even though we only have a few people in the room today, and hopefully some more will come as the meeting progresses, which is often the case. Anyway, hello, I am Jeff Peckrell, and I am one of three committee chairs for the Human Rights Working Group, along with Dolores Perez-Heilbrunn and Melvin Starks. And this is the forum. I am the chairperson of forum. And just a few logistics in case you haven't been here before. We have sign-up sheets on the table back there. If you're not getting our emails with information about our sessions, do sign up there, and you'll get about a couple of emails a week, maybe a few more sometimes. Bathroom is just around the corner. You normally do Q&A at the end of our talks, and that's what all the cards are for on the tables and chairs. I think for today's session, we're going to have two Q&As. So there'll be one halfway through the meeting and another one later on. Just a little different, but we'll still write our questions on the cards. And of course, for those of you on Zoom, you just ask your questions in the Zoom chat, and we'll be bringing those up and asking them along with those from the room. Other announcements, let's see. This Wednesday, the Human Rights Working Group is sponsoring a vigil on the church steps. I believe it's from 6 to 9 a.m., and a movie in the evening, and probably some speaking as well on the topic of Iran and supporting the protesters who are decrying the injustice of the system there. So that's coming up this Wednesday, the 28th. Next Sunday, we don't have a forum. But 2 weeks from then, on February 8th, we'll be having Katia Padilla, and she is from the Latino Task Force, and she'll be coming and speaking to us about the good work of the Latino Task Force. And the weekend after that, we have Bisma Jaffer, and she's from the Council of Islamic Relations. I believe that's what the acronym CAIR stands for, CAIR, and she'll be speaking on something related to Palestine. And then the week after that, which is February 22nd, we have a speaker from, I believe he's from the Answer Coalition. I think his name is David Paul, and he'll be talking about Venezuela and the attacks and, the injustice happening there, as well as the problems in Venezuela. So those are some of our upcoming sessions. We hope you'll come back for all of those. At this point, we should do our Ohlone land recognition, and then I'll introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, acknowledge that our community is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribes, the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working here, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. The Greater Bay Area is also the ancestral territory of the Miwok, Yokuts, Patwin, and some other tribes. As the original stewards of this land, the indigenous peoples understood the interconnectedness of all things and maintained harmony with nature for millennia. We honor them now for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. So most of our topics here at the forum seem to relate to politics nowadays, but today it'll be a little different, but it's still very relevant to the ideals of this church and of the Human Rights Working Group. And so today we have Frances Aubrey coming to speak to us, and she is working on a book. It's nearly finished, I believe, and she'll tell you all about the book, but it relates to trauma that she experienced in her life and some coping skills that she has determined from that she feels are worth sharing with all of us. And I was talking to her before the session started about basically the national trauma that we are all experiencing right now, and how I'm hoping that this will be things I can use in my life to deal with what I'm experiencing reading the news every day. And she comes to us from across the bay in Oakland, I believe. Frances lives in Oakland, so not too far away. So without further introduction, I'll bring Frances to the podium to speak about her book. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I've been a Unitarian since 1972. So I've been a Unitarian for a long time. I know this church. I have to read my notes. And I love this church. It's a beautiful one. I'm a mother, a wife, a grandmother, a stepmother, an artist, a writer, and a trauma survivor. I really appreciate the courage it took for you to come today, because trauma is not an easy subject to think about. Healing is not an easy subject either. So I thank you for being here. Trauma is not what happens to us. Trauma is what happens inside us when an experience overwhelms our ability to cope, and we can't escape or protect ourselves. After a trauma, we don't feel like ourselves anymore. We stop feeling joy. We stop laughing. We don't feel safe anymore. And healing from trauma is hard work. It takes time and commitment, but it's worth it because the result is a life that works for us, shared with people we love and who love us. Joy, serenity, and a sense of safety return to our lives. I'm going to give this talk in two sections. First, I'm going to give you some key facts about trauma, how it affects us, and what kinds of things researchers and therapists have discovered that help us recover from it. Then I'll share 10 essential components of healing to guide you on your own journey. These are components that I have been writing about for 5 years. I've been writing a book called Nana's Kick-Ass Book of Life, which I hope to publish this year. Is anyone else on a healing journey currently? Just raise your hands. Great. Why am I here today talking to you about trauma and healing? Why do I think I might have something useful to share with you? Well, in addition to being a trauma survivor, I've been married 4 times. That's a lot of learning what doesn't work 3 times. Three of my marriages taught me what marriage isn't. I've also had 50 years of talk therapy. I attended Al-Anon meetings for 30 years, and I use the Al-Anon program every day. I've healed a lot, and I'm not finished yet. Although I never considered myself wise, I spent the last 6 years writing a book of wisdom, which I hope to publish, as I said. It began as letters to my grandsons and surprised me by turning into a book that offers stories, tools, and insights that can help people create a joyful, meaningful life. Now let's talk about us. How many of you had a great childhood? Raise your hands. I didn't. Did you? Great. Great. I did not, and most people I know didn't. And who thinks they might have experienced some form of trauma in their lives? Anybody? Trauma has only emerged into popular consciousness in the past 34 years. Judith Herman's seminal book on trauma and healing was published in 1992. Bessel van der Kolk's book, called The Body Keeps the Score, came out in 2014. Oprah Winfrey wrote What Happened to You? With Bruce Perry, a neurologist. Trauma can be caused by many things: abuse, neglect, rape, an accident, a natural disaster, and war are some. And let's not forget that racism, sexism, and patriarchy wound millions every day in countless ways, both physical and psychological. We see trauma caused by racism regularly on the night news. But millions of children and adults are traumatized by racism every day in ways both obvious and invisible. Patriarchy creates trauma in everyone. It supports violence against women and children, but it also wounds men deeply and prevents them from healing by teaching them a lie, that the only masculine emotion is anger. Let's see if I've missed, I may have missed slides. Could we have the next slide? I think that's the first. No, oh. Let's see where we are. Could we go to the next one? Okay, great. Let's try the next one. Great. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not used to this. So could we go to one more? No, go back, please. Okay. I think we're right. A traumatic event can last a moment, hours, days, or years. It can happen to us at any age. I studied childhood trauma because that's what I needed to heal from. If we go through an awful experience as children, we quickly bury our feelings of terror, grief, and anger because they're too overwhelming for us to deal with as kids. This is a natural, normal response to trauma. It's how we survive. Because we bury our feelings about it, many of us forget it ever happened at all. Let's try the next one. There we go. Okay, let's go one more. I didn't write down the names of the slides, so. Okay, here we go. When children experience something terrible, they assume it was their fault because kids believe they're responsible for everything, good or bad. It's called magical thinking. The problem is that when we believe we're responsible for something terrible happening, we're banished to a kind of hell, and it's called shame. We don't think, my parents are overwhelmed, or this isn't my fault. We think there must be something wrong with me. Shame convinces us to believe, I'm unworthy to be here. If anyone finds out who I really am, they won't want to be anywhere around me. I can't ever let anyone know who I am. Shame overwhelms us, not allowing us to feel any positive emotions. Laughter, contentment, and our sense of safety vanish. We're constantly on guard against being found out, and we are miserable. I experienced two forms of trauma. The first was emotional neglect, since neither my mom or dad ever asked me how I was or were interested in much of anything I did, thought, or felt. Emotional neglect isn't easily observable. My needs weren't being noticed or addressed, but I had enough to eat, a roof over my head, and no one was beating me or molesting me. By the time my dad came home from the South Pacific in 1945, Mom was drinking a bottle of sherry a day. In addition to being addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs, She also suffered from depression her whole life. This is a combination called dual diagnosis, depression and addiction, and it's very hard to treat, even now. Mom was never okay, not even for a day. Drunk all the time, she stayed up in her bedroom. So I took care of her for 3 years while my dad was at work and out of town, and made dinners for my younger brother and sister. Although I knew Mom was very sick, I was taking on the role of hero, trying desperately to keep her alive. But I failed. She took her life when I was 15. Now, in addition to the shame I already felt, I was certain I was a murderer. Mom had been such a burden to me that I'd wished she were dead. I'd been taking care of her, and she died. To me, I was clearly responsible for her death. My feelings of shame were relentless. Instead of spending time like a normal adolescent girl, giggling and whispering about boys, I spent all my energy making sure no one discovered that I was a murderer. If we can escape from a terrible experience and do something to protect ourselves, we're less likely to be traumatized. If we're helpless, we're more likely to experience it as traumatic. A child who's being abused or neglected can't sign up for another family, although I sure wished I could. I was living in a prison with no way out. Trauma survivors live in emotional agony for years, yet most of us survive. We deserve a lot of credit. We deserve a lot of credit. Because we have survived, we're not trauma victims, we're trauma survivors. And as long as we're alive, we can heal. Pierre Janet, a French 20th century psychiatrist, wrote, "Every life is a piece of art put together with all means available." This is what we do. We put together a life with whatever is available to us, and we triumph over obstacles that feel insurmountable. Millions of children are physically, sexually, emotionally, or spiritually abused every day. This is one of the tragedies of our society. Another is that the abuse is most often committed by a family member or a friend. Even one incident of abuse can have a profound effect on us, no matter how fleeting. And any sexual violation, no matter how seemingly innocent or subtle, is likely to be problematic. We tend to tell ourselves that our childhood was normal, no big deal. But we know on some level that something's terribly wrong. I tried so hard to act normal, even though I had no clue what normal was. Most trauma survivors don't. Symptoms of trauma are called trauma responses. If we're experiencing one or more of them, it's a tip-off that we've likely experienced trauma of some kind. Let's see the next slide, see if it's right. Great. I think. I'm sorry, the slides are a little discombobulated. I apologize. If we have experienced trauma, it's so important to know this. We may have been alone then, but we're not alone now. We can ask for help, we can be lovingly supported and deeply heard, and we can heal. If you've experienced any kind of trauma, I am so sorry. You didn't deserve it. You didn't ask for it, and it's not your fault. Okay, let's talk about trauma responses. The most common ones are ones we've heard of: post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, anxiety, and depression. My predominant trauma response was anxiety, but I had plenty of others too. Here's a list of some others. This is not a complete list because trauma can create a wide range of symptoms. So here they are. I'm going to read them slowly. Just think of whether they might be in your life or someone's life that you know. Addictions, being easily irritated, angry, or rageful, being triggered easily into panic by events, people, or places, being hyper alert or feeling scared most of the time, being out of touch with our feelings or our body, difficulty concentrating, thinking, and focusing, difficulty experiencing happiness and joy, difficulty trusting ourselves or others, eating disorders, flashbacks, having little energy or feeling stuck, insomnia, low self-esteem, nightmares, self-defeating behaviors, willingness to accept abuse from others. One reason why trauma is so hard to heal from, or for us to even be aware of, is that its effects are stored in two nonverbal parts of our brain, the reptilian and the limbic. Our feelings of terror, anger, and helplessness are stored there, but we have a hard time telling ourselves or anyone else our story because these parts of our brain have no words. They can only feel our terror. Our brain replays the feelings whenever we get triggered, throwing us off balance and ruining our serenity. This is not our fault at all. It's just the way trauma works in our brains. Friends and family may say, "Get over it. It's in the past." They don't understand why our symptoms don't go away. After all, that leg we broke in the 4th grade healed fine, right? Good as new. But our trauma responses cannot be outgrown. They don't disappear until we heal, no matter what our age is. If we haven't looked courageously at what really happened to us and healed, we can't be whole and we can't be happy. Healing is a battle. We're aiming for transformation, nothing less. Battling against our own fear, loneliness, anger, grief, and pain. We're birthing a new self. And this new person is not going to get born without us fighting with everything we have. I imagine you're thinking, do I have to wait until I'm her age to heal? Here's some good news. There's a reasonable chance it won't take you as long to heal as it did me. Here's why. Knowledge about treating trauma responses is much better now than when I started therapy back in 1972. Although medicines don't cure trauma responses, there are many new ones that help us calm down enough to do our healing work. And if I'd started going to Al-Anon meetings a lot earlier, I would have healed sooner. And also, I have hope that psychoactive drugs will prove useful to trauma survivors. I had 6 ketamine treatments 3 years ago, and I've experienced less anxiety since. So there are lots of reasons for optimism. I'm finally in a fun, supportive relationship with my 4th husband. I have calm, deep friendships in which I'm valued and loved, and I spend most of my days feeling joy and gratitude. Is my life perfect? No, it isn't. Am I still growing and healing? Yes, I am. Kaiser Permanente and the CDC partnered from 1995 to 1997 to study the effects of what they called adverse childhood events on the physical and psychological health of adults. It was called the ACE study. Some of you may have heard of it. It surveyed 17,000 members of Kaiser Permanente in Southern California. Researchers concluded that the greater the number of adverse childhood events a kid experienced, the greater the likelihood that they'd experience one or more of these health outcomes as adults. Disrupted neural development, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, mental illness, risky behaviors, including drug and alcohol abuse, promiscuity, unwanted or early pregnancy, domestic violence, a wide range of diseases, including obesity, heart disease, and cancer, and early death. There is an epidemic of terrible health outcomes for adults as a result of childhood trauma. Of course, any neglect or abuse is an adverse childhood event, and these were included. Seeing their mother being hurt or abused was another one. Witnessing conflict at home and gun violence were others. Living with an addicted or mentally ill person in the household was another. Healing from our trauma is the hardest work any of us can do, but it strengthens us, it transforms us, and it empowers us to create a life we could never have achieved otherwise. Because trauma is stored in nonverbal parts of our brain, talk therapy is necessary but not sufficient to heal from it. So combining talk therapy with other activities is critical. We finally got on the right slide. What may be the most important thing to do in addition to therapy is getting involved in a 12-step program or another appropriate support group. This is because healthy connection heals us. Shame and trauma cause profound isolation, and support groups break us out of it. I remember the first 12-step meeting I attended 37 years ago. I couldn't believe I was surrounded by a room full of people who'd had childhoods almost identical to mine. And they were willing to share their experience, strength, and hope with me. I was blown away. Here are some other things that can be helpful. And some of these may surprise you. Acupuncture, Aikido, dance, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, kickboxing, movement, neurofeedback, singing, theater, therapeutic massage, yoga, and remember play, what we used to do when we were children? It turns out that both play and improv exercises make us feel connected and joyful. So they're healing too. And a lot of these are easily accessible and free. Jeff, I think we might want to take questions now because we finished one section of talking about what trauma is, and we'll move on to the next section. But if you have questions that relate to trauma itself, I may or may not be able to answer them, but I'm happy to try.
I just have one so far, but others who have them, please jot them down the cards and we'll ask them shortly. Okay, someone asked, when do children start to remember? Is it possible that serious mistreatment of very young children under the age of 4 can cause problems in later life? Could they remember these traumas, in other words, when they're at such a young age?
That's a very good question. The answer is yes. we record everything. We record everything before we're born in utero. Now, we don't have words, right? When we're born or when we're one, but our brain records it all, primarily in those parts of the brain that are nonverbal. I came across an appalling statistic the other day, which is that some millions of children are sexually abused before they're one. So the answer is absolutely yes. We record everything, whether we have words to think about it or, it's even hard to get to once we have words because of the nonverbal parts of the brain where the trauma is stored. Great question.
Does anyone else have a question I can ask up here?
That's good.
Sure.
I'm thinking of Donald Trump and trauma. Yeah. Could you comment on him and his psychology and whether he was traumatized? Thank you.
I'm not a therapist and I'm not a physician and I'm not a neurologist. I'm just a trauma survivor. So my thoughts are simply those from a layperson who's studied this a lot. It's pretty well accepted that Trump was not loved by either parent. And that is how narcissists are formed. 16% of our population, it's estimated, are narcissists who, because they're not loved, do not develop a capacity for empathy. And Trump certainly qualifies in that. There's another category of people called sociopaths, I'm sure you've heard the word, and psychopaths. And they can't feel empathy, but it's for a different reason. Their brains are born without an ability to feel any feelings. And that's 4% of our population. So it seems like a lot of what's going on right now is decisions being made by people who don't feel empathy. I don't know what their backgrounds are, but that seems to be the way our leadership is going right now. So that's very much a layman's answer. Okay, now we're going to move on to the 10 components that I think are key to healing from trauma. Sorry. I think we're okay. Okay, number 1, being truthful with ourselves is essential. This sounds logical. How can we heal if we're not being truthful with ourselves? But it's not as easy as it sounds because our minds store feelings, knowledge, and memories very carefully, withholding from us things that it believes we can't yet handle. I've learned that I won't realize something about myself until I'm ready to deal with it. For example, recently my son told me that I didn't listen well to his feelings when he was a boy. Consequently, I neglected him emotionally. And he became a trauma survivor himself. This was deeply distressing knowledge, which I could only let in after decades of healing. I mourned for weeks that I'd failed to be the wonderful mother to my son that I had so wanted to be. My trauma responses impaired my ability to be a nurturing mother. 2, we need to mourn our lost childhoods. In order to heal, we need to face a deeply sad reality. that if we weren't loved as much as we needed to be when we were kids, the child we were will never get the love they needed from their parents. It's too late. We're grown up. And we need to mourn that terrible loss. For me, this happened about 3 years into my therapy. After I'd mourned for several months, I realized that I, the grown-up Frances, could still love the little girl Frances who was inside me and longing to be loved. Number 3, we need to learn to love ourselves unconditionally. I know this is a tall order, but it's exactly what we needed as children and what we didn't get, right? By unconditionally, I don't mean perfectly, by the way. I started to learn to love myself unconditionally when I imagined what that would feel like, physically and emotionally. It felt wonderful. Using our imaginations is a powerful tool for healing. When I started going to Al-Anon meetings, I felt loved unconditionally. It wasn't because anybody there loved me so much. It was because of the structure of the meetings themselves. Lots of honesty, no advice, no gossip, anonymity, sharing experience, strength, and hope. Plus, the steps themselves are designed to heal us in a specific order. Newcomers to the 12-step program spend several years doing the first 3 steps. They're the basis of all the others. When my 3rd husband started drinking 3 glasses of wine every day and becoming someone I didn't recognize, and I was terrified and desperate, I finally started going to Al-Anon at 46. I urge you not to wait until your life's a hot mess before you check out 12-step programs and see if they work for you. If you grow up in a dysfunctional family, the chances are high that there's alcoholism or another addiction somewhere. A grandparent, a cousin, a great uncle, somebody. The program works if you work it. Number 4, we need to unlearn a lot. Melody Beatty writes, many of us have a deep, sometimes subconscious belief that we were and are a burden to the world and to the people around us. This belief can block our ability to enjoy life and our relationships with others. We may feel we are a burden to God. If we have that belief, it is time to let it go. We were always gifts. Even if our parents didn't get that. We are all, yes, every one of us, you included, my dears, gifts to the universe. So if we have the belief that something is wrong with us, that we don't deserve to be loved, we need to unlearn that in order to heal. A 5th key to healing is to realize and accept that every thought we've ever had and every feeling we've ever felt was normal. I've learned in decades of therapy and in Al-Anon meetings that there's not a feeling in the world that's not okay and normal. Not one, nada, zilch. No matter what you're feeling, no matter the circumstances or the situation, your feelings are always and always have been normal. As weird as they might have seemed at the time, we can trust that they were normal, and we can trust that eventually we'll understand them. Once we accept this idea, it changes us. Oh, I'm not the terrible person I thought I was. How about that? There are reasons I did what I did and said what I said. I was always doing my best. And you were. There are only 4 basic feelings: sad, glad, mad, and scared. All the others are variations. Feelings aren't facts, but they're a form of truth. They tell us what's really going on inside of us. Experiencing a range of emotions every day is part of being human. If we refuse to acknowledge our uncomfortable feelings, they fester, like a wound that can't heal. Feelings don't go away, they wait. They wait as long as it takes us to feel them. And this is important. When we push down our uncomfortable feelings, we also push down the good ones. An Al-Anon member quipped, "My feelings have been in the freezer so long, they've got freezer burn." 6, the basis of our healing is the relationship we have with ourselves. Beatty writes, "When will we become lovable? When will we feel safe? When will we get all the protection, nurturing, and love we so richly deserve? We will get it when we begin to give it to ourselves." We need to commit to doing the work on ourselves. I just call it the work. It's really hard work because this is where all our pain is. But it's pointing us toward healing if we can listen. I've suffered a lot in my life, but I've always fought to use my pain and force it to help me grow. Being alive here on this incredible earth is an awesome gift. The likelihood of you or me being here is 1 in 400 trillion. Wow. No one just like us, no one just like you or me has ever existed before. And no one just like you or me will ever be here again. Each of us is unique. Each of us is a miracle. Because everything life creates is a miracle. Since we're unique, amazing creations, we're worthy of appreciation, admiration, and love from ourselves and others, right? Wouldn't you admire, appreciate, and love an incredible, miraculous gift if it were given to you? Of course. Well, you are that gift. 7, courage is key. The word courage sounds so wonderful. It may not really be courage that gets us through our healing journey, though. It may be something that's a lot less noble sounding. I honestly don't know if I have courage. What I do know I have a lot of is stubbornness. I hate giving up on something I really want. My healing journey required an openness to changing my life at profound levels, which could be called courage, I guess. It required willingness to accept truths about myself I didn't want to know and feel emotions that were scaldingly painful and that I didn't know how I'd survive. And it demanded perseverance, which to me is darned close to stubbornness. I was just not going to let myself live a miserable life and die a lonely, tragic death like my mom. Courage is not a feeling, it's a series of decisions to keep on going no matter what, to fight like hell for sanity, for serenity, for transformation, for a life we love. On my journey, my decisions have been guided much more by my soul's needs than by financial or practical needs. When I feel disconnected with my deeper self, I find a place to be alone, get quiet for a while, and ask my soul what she needs. The answer is often not anything I expected, and it frequently doesn't make sense to my worldly self. It may push me to make huge changes in my life. During my second marriage, I lived in a lovely large house in New Jersey with great public schools. My son was in 6th grade and my two stepsons were living with my husband and me while they attended high school. From the outside, it looked like a great life. But for me, it was sad and lonely. I was doing what was expected of me instead of living a life that fed my soul. Although I took the train into New York City once a week to take art classes, and I loved coaching my son's little league team, I was suffocating spiritually. Then a nightmare told me that my soul was in danger. I needed to act quickly. I had to save my marriage. I had to leave my marriage to save my soul. That summer, I moved myself and my 13-year-old son to Washington, D.C., where I'd grown up and where my sister lived. I knew she could affirm who I really was, and I'd be supported emotionally. A few years ago, I made another bold move in response to my soul's yearning. This time it wasn't geographical. I knew the chances of getting published for the first time as a grandmother were roughly slim to none. Yet, 6 years ago, my soul let me know that she wanted me to share everything I'd learned with my two grandsons, and my writing gradually turned into my book of wisdom. This adventure, this journey that we are all on, that each of us is on, is really a soul journey. With the world trying to convince us incessantly that the only things worth focusing on are image, possessions, and status, it's challenging to create space to listen to our souls. But if we fail to invite our soul's vitality into our lives, we'll consistently feel unsatisfied and disconnected. Learning to trust ourselves and learning how to determine who's worthy of our trust is my 8th key to healing. When we're around people who are trustworthy, then we believe that trust is possible. When we're treated as if we are trustworthy, then we begin to trust ourselves. Feeling safe physically and emotionally is a basic human need, as essential as food, water, and shelter. When we feel safe, that's when we can engage in the process of healing. In fact, feeling completely safe whenever we experience it is in itself healing. As mammals, we have very keen senses that tell us immediately when we aren't physically safe, and it's important to pay attention to those. We can trust a cab driver to get us to the airport, but trusting someone emotionally is another kind of trust. We all want to be connected with others on a deep level. That's normal and healthy. But sometimes when we long for emotional closeness, but we're not yet healthy enough to handle it, we trust someone too soon and discover later that the person is not emotionally trustworthy. I found this to be really painful. So I've learned to take plenty of time deciding whether I can trust someone. I also needed to become emotionally trustworthy myself. For decades into my adulthood, the childhood trauma I'd experienced made me emotionally untrustworthy. For example, instead of understanding that someone had hurt my feelings inadvertently and treating them kindly, I'd erupt in rage. As you recall, being rageful is a trauma response. Doing a step 3 is an act of trust. It goes, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. These days, I trust my higher power to guide me toward what's right for me, but that didn't happen right away. I had to learn to trust my higher power too. It took time. And learning to trust myself, to believe that I was capable of making good choices and only invite people into my life who were loyal, kind, and loving, took many years. The 9th essential aspect of healing is learning to listen to our body, heart, and soul. Soul is the aspect of yourself that's always been there, ever since you were born. the essence of you. It's unique and it's mysterious because we can't see it or touch it. Our soul is the tenderest, most passionate, most vulnerable part of ourselves. It may at times be hidden from us, but it is always, always important and meaningful. We cannot be joyful without being connected to our soul. I invite you to listen to your soul regularly. What I do is find a quiet place alone. I ask my soul, what do you need? What would satisfy your deepest longing? How can I nurture you most authentically? We also need to learn to listen to our bodies. Your body has enormous wisdom and will tell you what he, she, or they needs if you listen. But this, too, is not as easy as it sounds. If we're trauma survivors, emotional pain is stored in our bodies as well as our brains. Parts of ourselves have been separated from our awareness. So healing is a process of becoming aware of all these parts, integrating them, and becoming whole. If we haven't yet learned how to take good care of our precious body, we can take steps to begin understanding that our body is worthy of appreciation and love. Getting into therapy, being in a support group, practicing yoga or mindfulness, learning to meditate, or going to 12-step meetings can help us become more accepting of ourselves and more able to appreciate and love our bodies. And here's the 10th key to healing. Gratitude and serenity change everything. Practicing gratitude daily is transformative, regardless of whatever is or is not going the way we want it to go. We can focus on all the things we have to be grateful for, starting, for example, with air, sunlight, and water. I imagine your life isn't exactly what you want it to be. Mine isn't either. But the amazing truth is that you and I are alive on this exquisite, miraculous earth. And feeling grateful is not only a natural response, it's necessary for healing. I find serenity in these ways. One is by choosing what I think, using affirmations, and keeping track of what I'm saying to myself. The second is by staying in touch with my body, listening to where it's tight or tired. When my stomach starts getting tense or my neck hurts, I breathe deeply and invite my body to relax. Or I may do some stretching, which almost always helps me center and calm myself. Going to an Al-Anon meeting will usually help me stay serene for days. Journaling, making art, walking in nature, or talking to a friend all help me hold on to my serenity. And here, that's 10. But I want to add one caution, and it's this. If you want to heal your life, here's an important caution. Any addiction, whether it's to a substance, an activity, or something else, will stop you from healing and prevent you from creating a good life for yourself. I guarantee your ship will never sail beyond the harbor if you're trying to heal, but you hold on to an addiction. So you need to choose addiction or healing, stuck in quicksand or creating a new, better life for yourself. The Canadian physician and lecturer Gabor Mate talks movingly about what causes addictions, pointing to trauma. Quote, "Don't ask why the addiction," he says. Ask why the pain. Millions of us are addicted to some substance or some activity that causes serious problems in our lives, but we don't stop because our addiction is numbing our pain. From rape to war, from abuse to abandonment, from sexism to racism, most of us living in the US today are trauma survivors, trying our best to stay emotionally afloat and keep our pain at bay, whatever the cost. What I'm suggesting is that you walk towards your pain, not away from it. In my experience, this is the only way you can make the changes that will create the life you so much want and deserve. To conclude, I encourage you all to start on your healing journey as soon as you can, or if you're already on one, to keep going and never give up. To feel fully alive, to become completely ourselves, to learn to love and be loved. These, I believe, are why we're here. Thank you so much for being here today. And there is a sheet on the table in the back. If you want me to send you lists of resources and book recommendations, I'm happy to do that.
Would you like to say anything about the evaluations also?
Oh,
Frances?
yes. There are also evaluations, I think, on your chairs. This is the first time I've talked about trauma and healing. So I really would love your honest feedback. Tell me what I did right, but please tell me what didn't work. Whatever it was, because I hope to be doing these talks in other places. And, I want to make them as good as I can. Thanks so much.
And if they, and Frances, did you say that if they sign up that they'll be able to get a section of your book to read as well?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So the sign up sheet asks for your name and your email address, and then it has checklists if you want to get the book list, the resources, and then the 3 chapters. And the 3 chapters that I can send you are trauma, finding a good therapist, and mourning and grief, which is 1 chapter. So I'm happy to send those to you. Just let me know how to reach you.
So we have a few questions from folks in the room on Zoom. Someone wanted to compliment you for your courage and strength for being able to speak in such a vulnerable way about your trauma. So I wanted to pass that on, and I
Thank
really
you.
feel that too. It is really great to hear you speak about this. Someone said, these are 3 questions I'll read together because I think they kind of go together. I missed the first part of your talk. Was your father a part of your childhood? They also asked, what about your sister's trauma and her journey? And then also, who parented you after your mother committed suicide?
My father was very much a part of my life and gave me many things that I value. He was a trauma survivor himself. His sister had died when she was 3, and that was a childhood trauma. Then he went off to the war, and of course, war is always traumatic. He had PTSD when he came home, but no one knew what that was. He was a wonderful man with not much emotional intelligence, very smart, very funny, and loved me dearly. But I didn't feel it that much. So my sister had a very different experience than me. She was the scapegoat. If you know anything about alcoholic families, the children often take roles. My sister was a scapegoat. My brother was a lost child. And my mother rejected my sister and fought with her and became a very independent, strong woman. Fortunately, my mother's mother actually took my sister on. So, and loved her and mentored her. And that made all the difference in the world for her. She is certainly a trauma survivor, and my brother certainly is too. We each had very different experiences, which is often true in families. And we each dealt with our trauma and our trauma responses very differently. But we're very good friends, and we're actually all fine. None of us are drug addicts, and we're all quite healthy. And it's amazing. It's amazing and a miracle that we all are good at this age. I'm 82, and they're a little bit younger.
Thank you.
Did I get all the questions?
Yeah, you did
Okay.
address all of them. Thanks. We had someone else asked, what do you have to offer concerning child molestation, especially by adults? Is this an impulse and action that perpetrators should just accept? I think the recipients should just accept is what it should say. People have been molested. What is the proper response to that, to work through that issue?
From my reading, which is, again, I'm not a professional therapist, so, but I've read a lot about it. My understanding is that, and I go particularly to John Bradshaw's book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And it's actually out there on the table, if you want to take a look at it. He contends, and it feels right to me, that everyone who molests a child was molested themselves. That it's just this pattern of trauma and pain that just keeps on going from generation to generation. It's very hard to break. My lens, as I was telling Jeff, that I'm seeing the world through now, is that we are society that is trauma-based, that between, genocide, racism, patriarchy, sexism, and a few other things that I can't think of right now, we have all experienced some form of trauma, not everybody, but an awful lot of us, and we're usually unhealed trauma survivors. So we're going around kind of reenacting the traumas that we had usually as children.
Thank you. I have one more question. Please explain why being hurt by someone's speech or understanding behavior that is not a feeling. Please explain being hurt, quote unquote, by someone's verbal speech or untrustworthy behavior is not a feeling. The statement is that is not a feeling, I guess.
I think I can. When someone says something that hurts our feelings, it's not what they say, it's what we say to ourselves after they said it. I studied with Jack Canfield, who wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And he said, if I told you that you had green hair, would it hurt your feelings? Probably not. Unless you actually do have green hair. Probably not, because you know you don't have green hair, right? But if I said, you're the dumbest person I ever met, it would only hurt your feelings if something in you believed that you were dumb. It's how we process what happens to us that creates a lot of our feelings. It's also what we believe about ourselves. And we acquire beliefs very young, many of our core beliefs. And so one of the processes of healing is going back and saying, what do I believe about myself? And is it true? Usually it's not. My dad used to call his kids pinhead number 1, pinhead number 2, and pinhead number 3. Well, he thought he was being funny, but you know, how many brains does a pinhead have? Not too many. So, I mean, you just have to know what's going on inside of you, what you're saying to yourself, in order to understand your responses to what happens out there. Does that help?
Thank you. Okay, I believe we've had the last question. So thank you so much, Frances. It's a wonderful talk. I think we're all experiencing some trauma just reading the news every day. So I feel like I've gotten some advice I can use. So thank you for that. Okay, we'll just close with a couple of announcements. So this Wednesday, we're honoring the protesters in Iran with a vigil on the steps of the church from, I believe, 7 to 9 a.m. And then there'll be a film here in this space at 6 p.m. That's on Wednesday this week. There's no forum next Sunday, but then in February, we do have 3 forums. So we have Katia Padilla from the Latino Task Force coming here on the 8th. And we have someone named Bisma Jafra coming from the CARE, Council of Islamic Relations, to speak on Palestine, I believe. on the 15th. And then on the 22nd, we'll have a talk concerning Venezuela. So I hope you'll all come back for those. And thank you for coming today.